Welcome to episode 5 of the Java Basics series. In this episode, we'll go over how to store multiple pieces of data inside of one list structure, making use of Java's arrays and array lists. So the reason why we need collections like arrays and array lists is for problems which require storing multiple pieces of data in a single object. So, for example, as a potential situation where this is required, if we wanted to store a player's top 5 scores in a game, we'd have to create 5 separate variables if we're just using the concepts that we learned previously. So these would probably be integer variables, and there would be 5 of them. And quickly, these 5 variables, they all have to be updated when a new score is added, when a new high score is added. And this can quickly become really difficult to maintain. So to more efficiently store everything in one place, we need an object that represents a collection that we can put all the scores inside of. So now let's start learning about the first collection we'll go over in this video, which is a standard array. So an array can basically be thought of as a storage space with multiple rooms. And the number of rooms that are there has to be fixed because you can't feasibly expand or reduce the space inside a building that's already there. And so each of these rooms contain a different value. So let's say, for this example, we have an array that contains strings representing coin tosses. So the first value, which can be accessed by index 0, so the first value has an index of 0, not 1, because array indexes, or the positions of elements on an array, starts at 0. That's just the way programming languages work. So the coin toss value at index 0 is head, index 1 tail, index 2 head, and so on. So now let's start by actually creating an array. So let's say we want to create an array of a player's 3 top high scores in a video game. And so the way we create an array is firstly by giving the data type and then square brackets to show that this is an array that contains values of that data type, and then the array name, and then an equal sign, and then use the keyword new, and then write the name of the data type again, and then inside the square brackets after the data type on the right side, add how big you want the array to be. So say you wanted 3 items, which is what we want in this case, we would put 3 inside the square brackets as the number of elements in our array. So now we're storing high scores, which are integers. So the data type is an int. And then the array name can be high scores. And then now we can print out high scores. And you can see, unlike previous values like integers, strings, and booleans, which all printed out properly in the console. This just prints out a string of random characters. And the reason why is because the print statement doesn't have a proper way of formatting arrays that's built into the print function. So it just prints out this, which is actually just the memory address, the location where this high scores array is stored in memory. So this isn't really of too much use to us. So the way we can print out all the items in an array easily is by using arrays in java.util.arrays here. You can hit tab and then it'll import the library for us, and then add a dot, and then use the toString method of java.util.arrays. So now this arrays.toString will convert an array into a readable format that can actually be printed out properly. So if we run the Java code, you can see that the 3 high scores currently are 0, and that's because we didn't really fill this array with anything yet. So that means the placeholder values are just 0 by default. But we can change that. So in order to do so, we can type the name of the array, high scores, and then the index that we want to change. So say if we wanted to change the first value here, then it would be the 0th index, because indexes always start at 0. And then we can set the first high score to be something like 57. And now if we print out the array, we can see the first value is now 57. And then we can add other high scores too. And so index 1 is the second item, so we can say 26, for example. And then finally, high score at index 2 can be, say, 5. And now if we run the Java code, you can see the first score is 57, second is 26, third is 5. And so, since there are only 3 items in the array, the only valid indexes here are 0, 1, and 2. So if we were to do any index that's higher than that, say 3, then that would technically be the 4th item in the array. And there are only 3 items in the array, meaning the 4th doesn't actually exist. So if we try to add another high score here, it says it's out of bounds. So we can only modify indexes that are actually in the array. From 0 to 1 less than the array length that we defined here. So we can also predefine the array so that we don't have to put in all the values manually after we create the empty array there. So instead of saying int high scores equals a new integer array, we can predefine the values by putting in these curly braces here. The same curly braces that we use to surround the code inside the main method and the class here. So these values that come inside of the curly braces have to be separated by commas. So we can do the same scores as before. And so if we run the Java code, you can see they're printed out properly. And Java will automatically infer the length if you predefine the values based on the number of values that are already in there. So if we add a fourth score 1, you can see that the length is now 4. Note that even if you define it this way with the curly braces, you still cannot define high scores that are out of bounds. So no matter what, arrays like these are always a fixed size. So now we've learned all we can do with fixed size arrays, but what if we need an array like object that can automatically expand or contract based on items that we can add or remove from it? So the way we create an array list is firstly by typing ArrayList and then in angled brackets, which are the less than and greater than signs for the opening and closing. Inside those, you put your data type, and then after that, a space, and then the name of your array list. And then you assign it a new array list. But after the word array list, you just put a pair of less than and greater than signs. No need to put anything in them for the right side. And then parentheses, and then finally a semicolon. So the data type has to be an object, meaning you can't use primitive data types like ints, booleans, and doubles. To know if a data type is primitive, you can look at the start of it and check whether it starts with a lowercase letter. So if you want to store integers, you'll have to use capitalized integer, booleans, capitalized boolean, and doubles also have to be capitalized. Because array lists can only store objects, not primitives. So now let's try creating an array list representing, for example, a shopping cart with items that we get from the store. So now we can type array list, and then you'll see this first option up at the top here. Hit tab, and then it'll automatically import array lists for us. And then we'll be storing strings representing the names of the food items inside the array list. So we put a string inside the less than and greater than signs here. And then our variable will be called shopping cart. And then we'll set it equal to a new array list with angled brackets like this. And then the way we can add items to the shopping cart is by typing in the name of the array list and then typing .add and then parentheses. So this add method of the array list, we can put in any item that we want to add to it, like for example milk, inside the parentheses, and then it'll add a string milk to the shopping cart. So then we can add even more things if we wanted to, for example apples, and then bread. And so now if we want to print out the items, all the items in an array list one by one, then we can use another type of for loop here. So we can go down to this for each loop right here and hit tab. And so then it'll create a template like this. So our array list shopping cart has to go at the end here after the colon, and before the colon to the left of it, we're defining a new variable that represents all the items in the shopping cart that we'll be iterating over. So we can call this shopping cart item, for example, and then we can print out each of the shopping cart items individually. So this is the cleanest way to iterate through all the items in an array list or an array. This also works with arrays. But for debugging purposes, it's more convenient to just use arrays.toString for arrays. So now if we were to run this code, you can see it prints milk, apples, and bread. So if we wanted to print out just a single item from the shopping cart, then we could use shopping cart dot get and then provide an index here of the item which we want to get. So let's say we want to get the second item in the array list, so that would be index 1. And the second item we added is apples, so apples shows up down here. And so now if we want to programmatically remove an item from the array list, we can use .remove, and then we can either provide an index to remove. So for example, index 2, that would be the third item, so that would remove bread. And then we could do the for each loop again to print out all the items in the shopping cart just to test that this remove method actually works. So now sysout item. So now you can see it's just milk and apples because the third item at the second index, bread, was removed. So if we wanted to get the size of the array list, the number of items that are currently in it, we can do shopping cart.size, and then it should print 2 because only milk and apples are left. We can also remove items based on their value. So if we wanted to remove bread, then it would scan through the whole array list for bread and then eliminate it. And so now we have 2 items again because bread was removed, so only milk and apples are left. So here's a summary with everything we learned about array lists. So now let's cap off the episode with a challenge. So for this challenge, what you want to do is make a guest list app where you use a loop to constantly ask the user for a name to add to the guest list until they say exit. When all the contents of the guest list, which should be an array list, all of the contents, or all the names in this case, should be printed to the user using that new type of for loop that we talked about earlier. Thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and make sure to look out for episode 6, where we'll be learning how to define our own methods to make our code more cleaner.